What is going on, everybody? And welcome to the 1% podcast. I'm joined by, man, I've looked up to you for a long time, and someone that definitely doesn't go at 1% every day, probably goes at like 4% every day. And he probably agrees with that himself. I'm joined by the man himself, Charlie Johnson. How you doing, bud?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Very good. And thank you for the very kind intro. So it's a pleasure to have an opportunity to speak on your podcast. So thank you.
No, it's awesome, mate. No, honestly, honestly, since day one, since I dabbled into fitness, I'm like, oh, who's this guy? And then further down the line, you're like, oh, holy shit, I'm actually talking to him. That's crazy. So
it's law of attraction, stuff like that. I think if you put like things out into the world, a lot of things like that can then come to fruition, if that makes sense.
yeah, 100%. So just kind of like anyone that doesn't know you, but they probably do, but just give like a little bit of intro, who you are, what you do. Who are you, bud?
So my name is obviously Charlie Johnson. I'm based between the UK, Dubai, and pre-COVID many other glamorous places, but not so much at the moment because of the wonderful travel restrictions. I run a business called CJ Coaching, which is the #1 transformation company in the UK and pretty much Europe. Most of our clientele is mainly North American as well, which is an interesting fact. And my mission is by 2030, I want to try and transform 100,000 lives. So that's my big, bold claim for the next 9 years, 8.5 years, 9 years. So I have some work to do, which is what I was saying to Brandon before this, is that I have a really good habit of, in terms of like, I create time for myself by like building systems for stuff or hiring people. And then I fill that time with doing other things. So it's, it's a fun life that we both get to live, to be honest.
Yeah. It's funny because if anyone, do you know what's so funny? It's one of those things. It's like, if anyone said that, you'd be like, oh, like that's a big thing. But out of everyone that says that, everyone that I know actually in my life, the fact that you said that, I'm like, there's no doubt that you'll achieve that. Like literally, there's no doubt. It's not so. It's we've had this conversation before. It's not like if it happens. It's like, well, when will it happen? It might be in 5 years. It might be in 10 years, but it will happen.
Yeah, realistically, everything's just a matter of time. And it's like what will come into podcast. It's like whether it comes to losing fat, building muscle, building a business, whatever it might be, everything is just essentially being consistent and repeating a process and finding a winning formula, and then essentially not getting bored of that winning formula, because that's like, we're going to talk about obviously fat loss in a minute. One of the big things I see so many people do in terms of from a fitness side of things, they get bored of what they're doing and they want to go try some other ludicrous approach, and they just bounce from idea to idea, and that's why they never really find anything they can adhere to or be consistent with and get long-term results. And I think respectfully, the older that I get, the more I understand the importance of like longevity in the game of everything you do, whether that be fitness and not destroying the joints, so like learning to train correctly, or whether that be from a business perspective, from building solid foundations. It all comes down to the basics, really.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that leads on nicely. To be fair, you've kind of answered the first thing. We're going to cover 5 reasons you're still fat. So to most of the people out there, the goal is for everyone in the world. They want to be leaner. They want to be stronger. They want to be more confident. So, mate, you lead it. We'll do 5 points.
Okay, we'll go back and forth.
Yeah, cool.
I sort of alluded to it there, but I'm going to go on that one anyway. So it'd be consistency. So, and I was that guy for a long time. So the biggest mistake people make is Monday to Friday, they've got like a set regime of they're sticking to a certain diet, and then Saturday, Sunday comes and it's an absolute shit show. And the reality is, like, this is what we teach clients, is you can still enjoy the weekends and have like meals what you want, but you just have to be able to balance things in and factor things in. So like one of the things we do is we use what I call like a free meal approach, where essentially like one meal a weekend, you can have whatever you like. The only rule is you don't eat like a dick, and you don't eat loads of stuff that's going to destroy your digestion and cause any issues with that. And providing you do that, you're good to go. And I think it's one of those things that people need to understand. You can have things in moderation and then still get results, because what happens is people try and go from like a famine to a feast mentality, that like Monday to Friday, they basically starve themselves. And then come Saturday, they go off the rails big time. And that's really what we'll need to take into account of like, this isn't a good approach and a good relationship for you to have mentally with food. You need to think about how foods are making you feel, and you're probably in that vicious cycle where you wake up on Monday, oh fuck, I did it again at the weekend. I need to sort my diet out. I need to be super strict. And then you must see this all the time, Brandon. People then like, they'll cut all carbs, they'll cut all fat, and then come like Wednesday, Thursday, they're starting to cluck a bit again, and then they're starting to they're starting to fall off the wagon, and then it comes Saturday again, it's a free-for-all, and it's just a vicious cycle I see over and over again. Is that something you see a lot?
Yeah, well, I think that's the biggest thing, isn't it? It's people have that routine Monday to Thursday sort of thing. They're like, right, 9 to 5 jobs. They know exactly what to do, breakfast, lunches, whatever it is. And they're pretty good. Like they are pretty good. They probably, in a sense, undereat a little bit. But then it comes that weekend and it is what I think as well. It's the release. It's like, oh, like, fuck it. Like, it's relax time. It's downtime. And that's the trigger for downtime. It is food, it's alcohol and things like that. So a lot of the time, like you say, it's trying to bring in the actual, like, you can actually have this, but just don't eat like a fucking idiot. Like, don't go nuts and don't binge eat pretty much. And it's just, I think what it comes down to is a lot of time, it's just knowledge on nutrition, because people that, oh, I didn't eat much, but actually like that meal, that alcohol, things like that, that's a lot of food that adds up. Like you're probably easily having, probably people could put down 5,000 to 6,000 calories on one night out, easy.
Oh, when you start piling alcohol in this, I don't know why I start thinking about Cheesecake Factory stuff like this, but me and Brandon have been for many a meal to Cheesecake Factory, and we're talking about moderation. One of the best examples of this, and just not eating shit for the sake of it, is when we went to Cheesecake Factory. And if anyone who knows the Cheesecake Factory, you have to order the Oreo Extreme Cheesecake. I ordered, I think it was like a red velvet one, because I was like, you can't go to the restaurant and have the same thing every time, Charlie. You have to be like, try different things. And it was shit. It was horrendous. So I ate like a quarter of it, and then I was like, I'm not eating the rest of that, because now a lot of people say it's a waste. Part of my head was like, I'll just order another cheesecake. I was like, no, that's reckless. Just don't do that. But like, I'm not going to eat like, I don't know, 1,000 calories probably of a cheesecake that I don't really want anyway.
Yeah.
And way my brain works, I'm like, think how long it would take me on a cross trainer to burn off 1,000 calories. Probably 80 minutes, I would guess. I don't even want this in the first place anyway, so it's probably not worth me eating it. And that's almost the way you want to think about things. And like, you can have certain foods and certain things that are quote unquote like not necessarily the healthiest thing in the world, but you just have to have some common sense with it, and like, eat to the point you're satisfied, or have half a dessert instead of the entire dessert is a very easy tip.
Yeah, I remember you saying that, to be honest, because it was like, I think it was off the back. You did quite a few photo shoots and stuff like that. And off the back of it, you said, oh, like actually you've learned a lot more now. Like before you used to eat kind of just like, you know, I've just been dieting for almost a year, and it's just, I used just to eat. And now you just eat till you get to that satisfied point and stop. Because like, it's easy. Like we've all done it. It's like where you kind of eat and you're like, oh, I'm full. But then you have like 5 more gulps, or you order another meal sort of thing. But actually just stopping at that point. It's almost like damage control sort of thing. And it's the same as like, we get more advanced with it. It's like the same as like, oh, you can reduce your calories in the week sort of thing to save more calories on the weekend sort of thing. And it is just like, it's damage control. And I remember you saying that, and it's a key point. It's just like, it is just coming down to having self-awareness, just self-awareness, not to eat like an idiot, really.
100%. And the biggest thing I'd want everyone to think about listening to this, if you're on like a quote unquote fitness journey, which I hate the word, is that you have to think about like one of the big goals of this is actually you becoming self-aware. So how does your body feel when you train? How does your body feel the next day? Do you feel well rested? How's your sleep making you feel? And the other big one is in terms of like, how are certain foods making you feel? And also like, how does your psychology actually get impacted by certain foods? Have you got an issue with food? Because I have clients come to me all the time, and I can tell straight away they've got psychological issues with food. Like they're attached to certain things. They have to have, I don't know, protein bar before bed or something ridiculous. Like they've got these weird habits or weird things that they have to have. And like, you have to remember that you control food. Food doesn't control you. So you can consciously control what you eat. And when you have an understanding of that and you can control that, that very much becomes a superpower, and it becomes much easier for you then to get in shape.
Yeah, 100%. And you kind of dabbled it then. It's like, well, how do you feel? It's almost like having a mental diary. It's like, well, what was the reason you needed that? What was the trigger
100%.
for it? And vice versa. I'm like, so how did you feel during eating it? And then how did you feel post? Did you feel guilty and satisfied at the time? Or was it just that short term kind of like boost because I felt down or lonely sort of thing? And that is a lot of time. It is, like you say, it's psychological food for so many people. And it has been, like, me and you can probably sit here and say, yeah, 100%, like nothing better than sometimes, like you say, like sit and having some cheesecake, because I just feel like I need it sometimes. I've definitely done it in the past, but over time you have that self-awareness and you learn those triggers, a bit like anything, and you start to produce new habits in its place. That's literally it.
There's a saying I really like, and it's pain is knowledge really fast. So when you, for example, this is what happens to a lot of clients, and I say this to them when, if they decide to finish coaching once they're lean, it's like, do you know the statistics, the amount of people who regain the weight back on, and then they actually even go back past where they started? It's like 90%. So not from just working with us, but like as a general, like in the fitness industry. So one of the big things you want to think about is that you don't want that to happen to you. Now, the reality is a lot of people won't necessarily listen, and that will happen to them. So the analogy of being pain is knowledge real fast happens because they're like, shit, I'm fat again, and now I'm back to square one. Now, this is why it's very important to try and catch these things early when you're in a fat loss phase and you've finished and you're starting to gain weight back on, is not just stick your head in the sand. If you're a client of Brandon's, a client of mine, or any of our ex-clients, is reach out and ask for help again, because a lot of people sometimes, particularly men, can have a bit of an ego that they don't want to reach out for help if they've already said they're okay, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I literally had the same thing. I worked with a lady a year ago, and I just sent her a message like, "How's life?" And she was like, "Oh, I'm glad you messaged me because for a year I wanted just to be like, I need some help because I lost all this weight and I felt almost ashamed and embarrassed to come back." I'm like, never feel. That's the thing. It's like never feel ashamed or disappointed, because like it has happened to a lot of people. Like, but you, by actually reaching out for help, is the strongest thing you can do, massively. And it's hard. It is hard reaching out for help sometimes. But when you've made this choice, that decision to better yourself, it's only going to lead to a positive outcome.
100%, 100%. So point number one is consistency. What's number two going to be? This is your choice.
I think you dabbled with it. You kind of said, so for me, it's training. So in a sense, actually training hard. And difficulty or intensity is different for everyone, but people just don't train hard enough, and they don't look at actually getting better, progressing, getting stronger with movements. And that's a big thing that I'm seeing even with clients now. I'm like, actually our main focus is just training intensity and training performance, because actually if you start to train hard, you start to progressively get stronger. Actually, you're, in a sense, again, you're burning more calories, and you're in a sense earning the right to consume the calories you're eating. You're building that muscle foundation, which we need in order to excuse me, in order to increase your metabolic rate at the end of the day. That's what it comes down to. So I'm like, well, the more muscle tissue you have, actually the more you get to eat, and the more you get to fuel your body for performance. And that's the biggest thing that I've seen probably over the last month, is that just people aren't training hard enough. Potentially, again, we can come into consistency, but mine's going to be down to intensity and training till failure sometimes.
The easiest tip for anyone at home to think about this, whether you're training like a pussy, or a pansy, is when you watch someone or film yourself, when you're finishing a set, if the last rep is the same speed as the first rep, you had way more in the tank. The last rep should always be really slow, that you're struggling and a little bit grinder. You don't have to kill yourself and get a heart attack to get progress, but the reality is there has to be some effort put in there. And if you're stopping at 10 reps because on the program it says 10 reps, but you could have done 20, the weight was way too light and you've just completely wasted your time. And the thing is, we want to think about is, and this is one of the things I talk about a lot with people, is that people think you have to spend hours in the gym. You could do 15 minutes if you wanted and absolutely smash it in like 4 or 5 sets probably, and have an insanely productive workout and get awesome results.
Yeah.
But it just means you have to do the right things. And the reality is most people spend too long doing the wrong things and not putting enough effort into it. Then they don't get the rewards out of it. And it's very disheartening for them because they think they're necessarily trying. And this is where you see people who they work out all the time and they do all the bro science stuff you see people doing. Yet the reality is that like the bro science stuff isn't really the optimal thing to get your results. Now, I've trained with in the last 2 weeks 2 IFBB pros, and this is throwing people on the last bit, but I respectfully, they're both genetically incredibly gifted.
Yeah.
However, some of their training technique and stuff, is interesting. So they did have some very good training techniques for some things, but some other things it was a bit questionable. So you have to often take context of different people's results, different people's genetics, because a lot of the time they'll be like, oh, Big Joe down the gym, he does bench press and that works great for him. So maybe that's what I should do. And then they just copy each other. And everyone else just ends up like sheep. And the reality is, I think when it comes to fitness, particularly when you're working with a coach as well, one of the best things you can do is use critical thinking. Think for yourself about, okay, why is Brandon or Charlie asking me to do this? And then if something doesn't feel right or you feel a certain way from something, provide that feedback back, and then we can make the correct change to help you.
Yeah, that's it. I think people just get caught up in that rat race because someone looks very good, like IFBB pros or whoever it may be. Like they're like, oh, like 3x10, it must work and things like that. And like a bench press must be the best way to build our chest. I'm like, there's a lot of movements we can do to develop muscle groups. And at the end of the day, it's got to work best for you. And I see it a lot more now, like doing sometimes like 4 or 5 sets. I'm like, why? Sometimes in my head, I'm like, 4 or 5 sets is a lot. Like, then why don't you think about doing 2 sets and then actually training at a higher intensity instead of actually spreading out that volume sort of thing? Like, I'm just thinking if you could do 5 sets, I'm like, you should probably go heavier for 2 sets or 3 sets and actually spend less time in the gym, probably. Like 5 sets on every exercise is going to take you a long time. So I might just do 2 sets, 2 warm-up sets, nice and light, and then just do, boom, 2 heavy sets, the best you can do to your best of your ability. Work 110% on those 2 sets, move on to the next thing. That's it. Instead of getting caught up in like, oh, the set. And then you'll get bored of your training, if I'm honest. Like if you had to do if someone said do like 5 sets of chest press, I'd be like, no, I'm bored at that stage.
100%. That's why I even remember doing programs when I was younger, doing like the shit you see like Flex magazine and stuff. It's 4 sets of 12.
Yeah,
like I get bored after the first 2, and I'm like, I've had enough of this now. Let's do something else.
yeah.
So yeah, I think people need to sometimes read between the lines for that, and also shout out for anyone who actually reads that stuff. Those are all ghost written. None of those bodybuilders actually do those programs.
Yeah. Oh god, yeah. No, not a chance. No. But I think it's just training intensity is one of those things that when you just learn to, it's that weird like flick that goes on, and then you're like, I get it. Like learning to push your body to that limit. Because I think people just underestimate their body. They're like, oh, that was hard. I'm like, yeah, but was it? Sort of thing. Your body's really tough. It can take a lot of pounding, and it can recover extremely well. Again, if you look after what you're eating, drinking, sleeping, all this sort of stuff, you can push your body harder than you think. So when you think, like you said, you've done 10 reps, I'm like, honestly, just do 2 more. I bet you could do 2 more, especially with legs. We're all guilty. Like, it's like if you're training with someone else, there's always 2 more in the tank, sort of thing. 100%. So I think that's a big one. It's just that training intensity. And like you said, if you said that last rep is the same speed as the first, I'm like, cool, do 5, do 10 more. 100%. And then start to monitor your lifts. And that's it. I think that kind of wraps that one up, doesn't it?
Yeah. Number 3, I'm going to go for calories. So by this, the main point of that is going to be calorie deficit. If you're obviously talking about fat here in that context, and also for gaining muscle and weight, like every single diet in the entire world, whether it be the keto diet, could be high carb diets, whatever type of diet you're using to lose fat, it only works because you're in a calorie deficit. Now, calorie deficit is where you are consuming on a daily basis less calories than you burn on a daily basis. So therefore, like you're in a net energy balance deficit. Now, like ultimately, you can't really lose body fat any other way without doing this. So when people say, there's 2 warning signs for me when people say when they're not losing weight, and there's 2 things that I already know straight away. So number 1 is like, are you hungry? If they're not hungry at all, I'm like, you that's definitely not right. So you're probably eating too much. And then, so that means definitely that you're not going to be in a calorie deficit. So when we're looking to lose weight, it is normal to feel some hunger. Now, a lot of hunger is often psychological because we use food to cover up emotional issues. Sometimes we emotionally eat. It's a habit. We're watching the football. We want to sit there and pick up popcorn, crisps, whatever crap people eat. And reality is like that isn't a physiological need to actually eat food. So if you cut the crap out of your diet and you just tighten up with those small things, you'll probably see that you actually are taking a lot more calories than you think. If you did a food diary and it's like, okay, tomorrow is Wednesday, I'm going to write down every single gram of food I eat tomorrow and everything I drink, I bet you consume a lot more than you think you do. Now, I'm guilty of that as well. Before this podcast, I had a rice cake with some almond butter. That wasn't my plan, but I was like, oh, I'm hungry. But I'm in a gaining phase, so I can get away with it a little bit. But
Yeah.
an interesting statistic, if I get my words out for anyone listening, on average, people who track their nutrition are actually out on their calorie intake by, on average, 29%. So they're actually taking 29% more calories than they think, which is astronomical. And when you actually think about it, like,
Holy crap.
I could, but if you think about it easily, like when you add condiments to food, you have, I don't know, oat milk and coffee, all this other crap throughout the day.
Yeah.
It accumulates a lot. And a lot of time, like, people aren't tracking very accurately. So, again, guilty. I'll be like, I'll put 150 grams of turkey breast on the plate, but whilst putting it on the plate, I've probably eaten another 50 grams whilst dishing it out. So these variables make a big difference. And if you're not seeing results with your fat loss, then chances are 99% likely that you're not actually in a calorie deficit. Now, we spoke a lot then about calories coming in. The other thing that you can look at is obviously calories going out. So in terms of burning more calories. I know this is something Brandon's a big advocate of, and that's just focusing. If you don't want to do cardio in the gym, focus on your step count. So being more active and just doing like more steps throughout the day, walking, hoover the house, clean the car, whatever you want to do. If you're moving or burning calories or using muscles, that will actually help. One big thing that I'm a big fan of is I use an Oura ring to track my steps and a lot of my recovery. And I find that a very effective tool just to keep an eye on how generally active I am.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. I think, like you said, going back to kind of sometimes it's those hidden calories, like you say, like it makes sense. Like 29% is a lot. It's like I had the same thing with someone the other day where like, it's been like 3 weeks, nothing's really budged sort of thing. So I was like, dude, just like literally like literally everything that goes in. And it turned out it was like olive oil for 2 meals a day. And it was like and olive oil, like, it's a teaspoon. No one puts a teaspoon in. So it's a good dash sort of thing. So I'm like, dude, that's easily 200 calories extra on each meal. So you're looking at 400 extra for the day. That's going to accumulate 4, 8, 12, 1,600 calories a week. That's like your intake done. Like your daily intake like tripled almost in the week. And it is, like you say, it's like actually be accurate with your monitoring of food, whether that is using MyFitnessPal, whether it's actually like a food diary. Sometimes just like get a pen and paper out, clock it up at the end of the day, like whatever it may be. And it is those little things. It's like sometimes just when you go food shopping, look at labels, like be aware, look at sources, look at things like that, and actually just look at the labels of things. Even like different rices and different pastas all have different calorie requirements. 100 grams of this might be 400, 100 grams of that might be 200. You're like, well, it's still pasta. I'm like, yeah, I don't understand. It could be just the process that it's gone through. It could be anything from whole grain to whatever, but it varies massively with food. So just being very aware of things like that makes a massive difference.
I got a great example of this. I had a client who was drinking, he wasn't losing weight, but he was drinking about a litre of orange juice a day, and he was using sweet chili sauce all over his food. So anyone who doesn't know, sweet chili sauce is basically like pure sugar.
Yeah.
So he wasn't losing weight, and I was like, I had the same approach. I was like, okay, fill in this spreadsheet every day, exactly what you're eating and drinking, everything. And then after like 3 days, I was like, what the fuck is this? So I was like,
yeah,
I think we found the problem here, my friend. Like, and then the next week he lost like 2 kilos. And I was like, there you go.
But that's it. It is just the little things though, isn't it? It's like, and also that's a nice thing. It's like, that's the reason he works with you, because it's having those extra eyes in. Because like, if I'm like, I'm doing everything, I'm nailing it, I'm doing my steps, I'm doing my cardio, I'm going to the gym, I'm monitoring my food, but why is nothing moving? And sometimes it's just having those eyes looking in and be like, okay, cool, something's not quite going to plan. What could it be? But calories the mecca. Like you say, calories is the foundation. Like, you nail your calories first. If you can get that consistent, then worry about your cardio, your supplements, like everything on top of that. Worry about that afterwards.
100%. If your calories are fucked wrong, nothing you can do.
Yeah.
You could train like the greatest trainer in the world. You could train harder than anyone else. You could recover harder than anyone else. You can do everything else more perfect, yet you still wouldn't see fat loss results.
Yeah, not a chance. I think who was it? I think Steve Cook did something like that. He did a video. He did the 10K challenge and then tried to burn 10,000 calories the next day. And I was just like, what? I think he didn't even get close. I think he got like 7,000 he burned or something stupid. But I was like, what you had to do for that? He was like running everywhere. He did like something ridiculous, like 2 marathon things, like ridiculous. And it's impossible. Like people are like, oh, I can train it off. I'm like, you can't. I'm sorry. Like it's impossible.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that. 100%. 100%.
What was that? 3?
That's 3. It's 3. Next point's yours.
Oh, what have we done? We've done consistency, training, calories. Oh, a big one. God, why so really simple? Really simple. I would do kind of just maybe like general health. So sleep and digestion, probably. So those 2 areas. So looking at the quality of your sleep and digestion, I think probably everyone on this planet now is probably could increase their sleep quality. We live in a world where it's very stimulated now. We're not getting adequate rest and things like that. And we know from if we're not getting adequate rest, there's so many hormone imbalances that are going to come from lack of sleep, everything like that. I think you probably know stats more than I do, but it's like, if you get 3 nights of bad sleep, it's like you're under the influence of alcohol and things like that. Like you're not performing, you're not recovering, your hormone levels are out of whack. You're not processing nutrients correctly, everything along those lines. So sleep, and if we dabble into digestional health, so like, do you get bloated? Are you actually absorbing nutrients correctly? Do you have the shits? Are you just like driving food out? It goes in, it comes out. So actually starting to take care of like, right, what foods agree with me and what don't. So I probably like sleep and digestion, more of the overall health I would go.
So these are like 2 of the hidden pillars we really look at with clients that people don't really look into. So when you look at digestion, scientifically, our immune system is actually 77% based in our digestive tract. So if that is proverbially up shit's creek, you've got a real problem, because that's going to impact recovery. It's going to shoot cortisol levels up, which is then also going to blunt fat loss. And cortisol also ties into sleep, which again, when you're not sleeping correctly, you're stressed, your cortisol levels increase. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, cortisol is a stress hormone. And when cortisol is released, it actually increases the likelihood of you storing body fat. So if we're looking to lose body fat, trying to keep cortisol and stress as low as possible would be very beneficial. Now, I'm give it a great practical example of how someone might have seen this, a real case scenario for themselves. So you're really stressed at home, you work out loads, you stick to a diet, but you don't really see any progress. Yet you go away on holiday, and after 3-4 days, you start getting leaner and you start looking better. Why is that? Because you're relaxed, you're sleeping probably more, you're sleeping well, and your stress levels are reduced. And when we're very stressed, what also happens, we will increase the amount of inflammation in the body, and we'll probably hold a lot more water, which again will make us look worse. So it's like a double whammy effect, and has a very big impact on absolutely everything we do. One thing I say as well for people from a business point of view, there's a lot of dumb stuff I hear people saying like, "Oh, I'm the hardest worker." I mean, in the gym world as well, I'm the hardest worker ever, and all this other bullshit. So, that's completely moronic. So we don't want to think about working hard. We want to think about working smart. And the reality is, you're probably not working that hard anyway. So if you look at people in China, like the Chinese version of Amazon, I can't remember what it's called, but people there, their normal working day is 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week.
Yeah.
6 days a week, they do like they do that. And like people here in the UK are like, oh, I work really hard to do like 9 to 5 or whatever. Like, there's like levels of stuff, and like you want to focus on working smart and being efficient with what you do, rather than just trying to like run yourself into the ground. So whether it comes from a fat loss side of things, building muscle, looking after your family, building a business, if you're run down and tired, your ability to make critical and correct decisions is going to be heavily impacted, which is going to have a lot of negative impact. So for anyone out there, I would highly suggest keeping a good eye on your sleep. Some practical tips I would add in would be, try not to eat within 2 hours of going to bed, because that can increase your resting heart rate and will have a negative impact on recovery. Don't drink a load of water before you go to sleep, because then you'll be up all night going to the toilet, which is incredibly annoying. And then try and, like basic tips, try to avoid stimulants within 6 hours of sleeping, and then make sure your sleep environment is good. So I sleep with a manta face mask, which it sounds creepy, but it's just like an eye mask.
Yeah.
And then try and sleep in a cool room is very, very helpful as well.
Yeah, like you said, it's like everyone knows what it feels like to have a crappy night's sleep. And when you kind of like, yeah, you feel okay in the morning, it gets to midday, you're like, I'm okay. And it kind of gets to that early afternoon, you start to crash, the cravings kick in, things like that, because you need those sugars, you need those carbohydrates that you think is going to energize you to keep you driving forward. And like you say, because of the hormone imbalance, it's like, well, actually now you're getting all these cravings kick in, everything like that. You'll end up overeating. So sleep and digestion plays that massive part, like you're saying. It is about building very simple, solid routines, like evening routines. So what do you do 2 hours before bed? It could be like, right, make sure you're in a dark kind of space, not big kind of lights in your face. Probably not the best example. But that's it. And it is just that, like you say, make a cool room, have a nice environment, make sure you've got a good quality mattress, like actually invest into your home life, invest into your sleep in a sense. It's like, if you're doing work late at night, you can buy some like some glasses. They block the blue light and things like that. It's very good. You can get nice ones. They don't have to be the horrible red ones that everyone sees. So there is lots of things you can do. Like you say, from a nutritional standpoint, what would you say pre-bed? Because people like, I think there's a big myth, isn't it? Like, oh, should I have like carbs before bed? Things like that. Like, I love carbs before bed. Like,
so from a scientific point of view, when you actually look at eating carbs, so like this is a very good subject, but you go into like spend an hour talking about this. But people have this like paranoia that you're going to eat carbohydrates after 6 p.m. and then you're going to gain like an inch in your waist, and that's complete bullshit. So we've already talked about already that calories are the king of everything and determine fat loss and fat gain. Now, the reality is as well, when we talk about that, we're not looking at like calories in terms of an hourly window or a daily window. Reality, we're probably looking over a week to really like take an average in terms of where you're at. Now, when it comes to calories being consumed in carbohydrates, actually taking carbohydrates later in the day can be very beneficial. Now, I'm going to give you an example of trying to explain why this happens. So anyone who's in the UK, I'm sure you've had like a massive roast dinner your mum's made, your dad's made, whatever, and then you want to pass out on the sofa asleep, or like Christmas. Now, when you eat a lot of food or you eat a lot of carbohydrates, what essentially happens is your body will release the hormone leptin, which is actually going to help you sleep and actually reduces cortisol levels as well. So that's why you get that sleepy feeling if you're just eating a massive meal where you just want to pass out. That's one of the big reasons why. So having carbohydrates later at night can be very beneficial in that aspect. And I actually do that with a lot of clients sometimes if they struggle to sleep sometimes. From a basic side of things, we could do another podcast on this, but you can go, I would suggest most of your carbohydrates you generally want to keep around the workout. But if you want to have some carbohydrates pre-bed, then there's no issue at all with that. And for a lot of people, I would suggest, like, I'm a fan of maybe limiting carbohydrates earlier in the day if you don't have like that many that you can eat because your calories are lower. Because if you can have more carbohydrates in the evening, you'll be more full, which means that when you come around to the likelihood of you being able to adhere to your diet, it's going to help a lot. Because one of the things I talk about is the danger zone when it comes to dieting. Now, Brandon, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever fucked up your diet at 7 a.m. in the morning?
No, not really.
I probably gather anyone listening to this probably hasn't either. And I don't think even I have either.
No.
Except maybe when I like go on holiday and
all inclusive, yeah.
Like I was at the airport and it's like we're back in the day when I used to be off the rails. I'd go to the airport and it's going to end bad. But the reality is you're not going to cock your diet up at 6, 7 a.m. in the morning. So if you keep that pretty strict, keep that maybe protein, fats, that will then give you more of a budget for carbohydrates later in the day. And the danger window is probably like 6 to 9 p.m. where they're sitting there, they're watching the football, they're getting bored, they're next to the kitchen, like, oh, I wonder what's in the fridge, I wonder what's in the cupboard. It's almost like calling out to them, luring them over. And the reality is, like, if you can have a bit more carbohydrates, a bit more food, then it gives you a bit more budget later in the day to be able to enjoy more food at that time, which again leads back to one of the big things alongside calories is obviously consistency and adherence. If you can have a bit more food, which would suit you, make it easier to you to stick to a diet and hit the calorie goals, then it'll help you to lose body fat and stay leaner overall.
Yeah, so, and like you say, actually, like the same with kind of the higher carbohydrates in the evening is a lot of people like, I'm a big advocate for like train in the morning, like get your workouts all prioritized in the morning in kind of the front half. So a lot of people, if you're working that 9 to 5, they go to the gym in the morning, kind of do what you do. I'm like, well, that's actually going to be your pre-workout meal, because you're not going to, if you're in the gym for, I don't know, 8 a.m., you don't want to be getting up at 6, kind of like having a meal that sort of time. Like actually like have a larger meal in the evening, go in a fasted state a lot of the time. I think anything before 8 a.m. training, I think you can get away with having a fasted state, just lots of fluids in the morning. By the time you're finished, vice versa, then you can go into that post-workout window. And like you say, if you're not training and things like that on that day, it's like you can intermittent fast sort of thing, or what you're going to do, and then have a protein meal. But it's it, like definitely carbs in the evening. Like I love it 100%. It's always going to be one of those things. Eating early though, like you say, eating early, 2 hours before bed, 100%.
Yeah, like for example, I will try and eat my last meal of the day by 7 p.m. and I'll try and get to bed probably 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
The only days I struggle sometimes, at the moment I'm trying to eat 900 grams of carbs some days, so that's a bit tedious.
Jesus, yeah.
But yeah, generally I'll try and eat 2-3 hours before going to bed.
Yeah, that's solid. And then 5, right?
Yeah, last one. So I'll take this. So this would be exercise execution and exercise selection. So
Okay, yeah, good shout.
one of the big things that I want people to think about. So we spoke earlier about working hard and working smart. What if I told you you could get 50% more results from putting in the same amount of effort? That sounds pretty good. Now, the reality is this is where most people are going wrong. Point one, they're setting themselves up for failure from the start because they're doing random exercises. They've got no fucking program they're really following. There's no real idea of what it's supposed to be doing. There's no periodization. There's nothing like that. And also the exercises you're choosing aren't actually working the muscles optimally. So just because an exercise exists doesn't necessarily mean it's any good. Now, I'm going to give an example. So a tricep kickback, for example, which you would use to train your triceps. So you're going to have, so you can do your right hand, you'd be left hand like on the bench, you'd be doing like extending from the right tricep. That is a terrible exercise. Why? With a dumbbell at the bottom position where your elbow's bent at like 90 degrees, there's no stress on your tricep. You're engaging your rear delt to basically hold your arm in place. And then as you extend your arm up, as the dumbbell gets further away, where you're getting weaker, and you're getting the muscle into the short position, the dumbbell, the weight's getting heavier because you're using a dumbbell and it's getting further away from you. So what we want to try and do is match exercises to like in terms of like the strength curve. So they're actually effective in terms of working the muscle through the full range of motion and actually being effective. Another great example of something like this would be like a dumbbell lateral raise. If you hold a dumbbell at your side, there's no force on your delt at all. But when you hold the dumbbell out to your side, where you're weakest, it's at its heaviest point. It's exactly the same thing with tricep kickback. So how would we make this more optimal? What we would look to do is use something like a cable, for example. So instead of a tricep kickback with a dumbbell, you could do a single arm cable extension. And with a cable, you've got a constant load and constant tension going through your triceps. So from the entire range of motion, you've got the same amount of load and pressure going through. The same thing for doing, if you were going to do a set of a lateral raise, you were going to do, you could do a cable side raise. You can have a load from the very bottom. Now, this is where people set themselves up with failure from the very beginning because their programs and the workouts they're doing just aren't actually going to give them the best results possible as quickly as possible. And this is without even talking about like executing exercises. This is just talking about the actual plan, their exercise they've chosen.
The actual base.
Let alone whether people are doing them correctly. Now, and that's something you can go into huge detail and like talk about moment arms and levers and stuff. But that would be something I think is a real big one. You like actually Dubai is a great place to see a lot of shocking training. It's
I wasn't gonna say it, but yeah,
it's fucking dreadful. They love a machine in Dubai because they don't really like free weights, which I do agree with in a lot of respects. But like again, one reason I spoke earlier about like, my thought process around longevity at the moment. So another thing you want to think about in terms of longevity, if you're performing exercises incorrectly, you're putting twisting forces through joints, you're essentially going to be trashing those joints. And you only got a certain amount of mileage on the tires in your joints, essentially, if you think about that. Yeah. And we want to try and get as much as we can out of them before we absolutely annihilate them. Now, a lot of people are going to be hammering their knees and elbows in particular because their training technique is shoddy. They've got no shoulder stability and they've got no hip stability. So the one last thing before I let Brandon speak for a round on about this anymore is when you think about your elbows and your elbows and your knees are essentially hinge joints. So they're basically a joint of consequence because you generally aren't actually really going to have any problems being created from the elbow and knee. It's going to be a consequence of either if it's your knee, it'll be your hip or your ankle, or if it's going to be your elbow, it's most likely going to be your shoulder and a lack of stability within your scapular ability to stabilize from there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like you nailed it, because it's like, the thing is, it's that, again, it kind of comes to that old school mentality now. We have so much knowledge now on literally everything you said, from joint mechanics, from range of movements, whatever it may be. We have even machineries now are getting more advanced, and we have this knowledge. It's even things like I know you use cuffs and things like that for a lot of shoulder movements and stuff like that, because obviously when we use a cuff, it allows the joint to sit where it naturally wants to sit, because your body's not built perfectly symmetrically fucking spot on. So actually when you use cuffs, you don't think, oh, actually this shoulder needs to do a little bit of this, but that one needs to do a little bit of that. But that's absolutely fine. You let them do that as long as that kind of muscle is in that engagement. And it just allows taking pressure off the joints. That's what we want to do. I think the biggest thing that I see with it is, like, especially when it comes to training, people still go in for the big movement straight away. Right. So we're doing legs, and we're going to go squat and hack squat as heavy as you can straight away, instead of thinking, actually, let's get the muscles primed, let's get the joints mobilized, let's get kind of like lubrication into the joint, let's get the muscles firing, and then maybe doing your squat or your hack, maybe your second or third movement in. Doesn't mean you're going to be, doesn't mean you're not going to make progress on it. Like, you're just not going to be able to lift as heavy because you've, in a sense, pre-exhausted the muscle, but you're going to save your joints. So actually, this, like you say, this health and fitness journey, what you're on, is a long-term game. Like, if you're 25 to 40, like, you've still got another 40, 50, 60 years of training. Like, why would you stop training at 70 years old? Like, you're still going to do some form of exercise. I want to keep my own joints when I'm that age. I don't want knee replacements and stuff like that. So actually, it's like you said, it is just it is very simple programming. It's just very smart programming. That's all it comes down to.
One of the things that I'd recommend for a lot of people when it comes to lower body training to think about, so you mentioned two of the big exercises there a lot of people do, which I'm big fans of, are a hack squat, barbell squat, and any type of variation like that. If you think about how the pelvis works, so we need to have a pelvis stable. Now, two of the technically it's one muscle, but it's on each leg. One of the biggest muscles that stabilizes our pelvis is our hamstrings. So one of the best things you can actually do before doing hack squat or anything like that, or a normal squat, would be do some variation of a hamstring exercise to activate and fire up your hamstrings to stabilize your pelvis for when you're going to do a big compound movement. So if anyone's listening to this, I'll try something like a lying hamstring curl. You could do it single leg, or you can do it dual leg before any exercises like that, and you should find it makes a lot of difference in terms of you feeling very stable. I'm actually currently I do like 2 sets of adductors at the moment, and I do 2 sets of lying hamstring curl, and then I go into like my main compound lifts.
Similar, yeah. I think the biggest thing as well, like you kind of, it's gone. Wait, I thought it's gone. I completely lost it. It is gone. It's completely gone. But yeah, like you said, it is like, it's, especially when you are loading things like that, it's priming the muscles in that thing. It's like when you're going to do a leg press, whatever it may be, like hamstrings, quads, they're all going to fire. So actually it's like warming them up individually. Oh, that was it. So it's like, not enough people are doing single arm, single leg movements, in my opinion.
100%.
So I think a lot of time, actually, like you say, it's probably best to warm up on single arm, single leg. And this applies to like single calf raises and stuff like that, because naturally you're always going to be driving through a dominant side a lot more. So actually start to develop up imbalances. It's going to be a big thing.
One of the things that people don't realize with this is they're effectively kicking the can down the road, because a lot of people don't want to deal with this stuff. Like, oh, it's fine, like it's all leg press. But it's like, reality is, okay, so you want to have one side of your body that's 70% stronger than the other side. So for example, we're talking about legs. So the way our pelvis works, that means that we're going to be putting a twisting force through there, which essentially means one of our SI joints in our hips is going to get trashed. So if you're going to get lower back problems, you're going to get pain, this is probably one of the big reasons why, because you have a massive strength imbalance. Now, all of these things are fixable, and it's something I've spent a huge amount of time on myself the last 6 to 12 months, and something that I'm learning a lot about constantly. But you just have to be patient with the process. And one of the things I was going to say is that a lot of guys in particular are reluctant to do things like a hamstring curl first, because I can't squat so much then. They're like,
Yeah.
Ego. What's the objective? So we have to be very objective with training. Do you want to squat a lot of weight? Do you want to be a power lifter, or do you want to look awesome and not have fucked knees and lower back? Like, what's the end goal? Because then if you know what the end goal is, you can then choose the right path to achieve that goal.
And all this comes down to, like, everything we spoke about, like 5 topics, like why someone's still overweight, is that actually just comes down to the mindset approach. Like, if you're coming into the mindset approach of like, oh, like I wanted this yesterday, I'm like, well, like whatever you do isn't going to help. Like, you can execute all this sort of stuff, but if you want it yesterday, you're never going to be satisfied. You'll quit sooner. So I'm like, actually come in with the approach of like, even if you do have that approach, like I want to receive results soon. Okay, cool. That's great. I'm glad you're motivated, but actually you've abused your body for a year. Well, it's not going to change tomorrow. It's not going to change in 6 months' time. So now you have to come into that longevity approach. Like, cool. Like, who cares? You're 30 years old, and like, you got so much time. Time is your greatest friend when it comes to everything in life. So I'm like, cool, learn all this. Take your time and learn this stuff. Because I'm like, if someone said, oh, maybe do single leg movements to you like 3 years ago, be like, oh, I wish someone said that then. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, we all could have wished we started it earlier, because that'd have been great. But actually come in with the approach of like your mindset first. Like, we're not here for the quick fix. We're not here for a 6-week kind of like fix. I actually think you're changing the rest of your life, fat free for the rest of your life. That's the mission.
And that's a process, and it's an acceptance from you to understand that this will never be done, because this will be done when you're dead, like as morbid as it is, because that's the same as everything in life. Like, your work will be done when you're dead, your responsibilities will be done when you're dead, but like, your responsibility is to yourself, to look after yourself, and to be selfish, to be selfless. And if you're a man or a female, for example, as the head of your whole household, if you don't put yourself first, you don't put your health first, you don't put your physical strength first, then all those people around you are going to be screwed when you physically fail. And then you might have a heart attack, or you could end up having some other sort of medical issue. What's going to happen to those around you? So as harsh as it is sometimes, I put some of my story yesterday. I'm reading a book at the moment. It talks about winning is selfish, was like the subject of a like chapter of the book. And it's like, it's true. If you want to be really good and you have to want to improve yourself, you have to be selfish. But by you being selfish, you're actually helping everyone around you, because if you don't put yourself first, no one else will, and you'll ultimately fail, and then you won't be able to help everyone around you.
Yeah, massively. And like you say, when it comes into an environment, especially when we talk about food, right? Like, if one person in the household decides to like, right, I'm going to start eating better and things like that, and you've got 3 kids, a wife, or whatever it is, I'm like, that's going to reflect on them. You're going to raise your children healthier. Your missus is going to jump on board. She'll get in better shape. Everything along those lines. It's the same as like, you probably do it like in your marriage as well, right? Like, because you eat really well, like your partner eats really well.
Yeah.
It's like, she almost doesn't get a choice. Like, this is it. So I'm like, but that's the best thing about it. It's because you focus on what you want to achieve, and actually looking after yourself, your own health, you only reflect on her. And then that will reflect on her friends, potentially, vice versa. So you're actually, when you do this game for yourself, which is the right thing, you're actually changing other people's lives, and you are inspiring other people.
100%. A great example that won't came in my head, but when I used to work in real estate 2.5 years ago, when I left, I like everyone in my office, we were like the healthiest office, because I like it just like it rubs off. And it's the same thing with everything like in life. Like, success is infectious, and people seeing success with their fitness is infectious. If someone's seen someone else do something, like, holy shit, he's done that, I want to do that as well. And that's like incredibly motivating. And the one thing I'd say to everyone listening to this is like, think who you could maybe motivate today with your own success, whether that be your partner, your kids, like your other family members, close friends, and think how maybe not only could you add another 10 years to your life, think about how you could add years to other people's lives by leading the right example.
Yeah, no, absolutely brilliant, mate. No, that's it. spot on. Absolutely nutshell to end it on. So it's awesome.
Yeah.
That was 5 points, wasn't it? Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, it was.
Cool. Easy, bud. If there's one piece of advice, you kind of gave it a little bit, but one piece of advice that you could give to someone that will take them 1% further forward tomorrow, what would that be?
Be open-minded and educate yourself quickly, because the biggest mistake people make, and I made this when I was younger, is thinking you know it all. And just because something works doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do. There could be something else you could do that would get you to the end result twice as fast with half as amount of pain. So I would think about learning quickly, and that will help you to level up faster, whether that's working with myself, whether it's working with Brandon, whether it's whatever you do. Just make sure you keep learning, keep open-minded, and you'll keep leveling up.
Yeah, exactly. And then take action on it. Don't wait,
100%.
just go. Just implement.
100%.
Implement fast. That's it.
Yeah.
But no, absolutely love that, bud. Appreciate your time. Thank you so much, because I know you're absolutely the busiest
right.
man on the planet as well. So it's cool. Awesome, bud. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you, dude.